Well, we have a pope that went to Villanova, which proves if you live long enough, you'll see anything in life, okay? And, I'll talk about that at the end, but as someone pointed out to me last evening, I was very wrong when people would say to me, I had heard his name actually come up in the past couple of weeks in some reports. I know people that are connected in Rome and things, and I just dismissed them out of hand, just thinking they'll never elect an American. People ask me, will they elect an American? I said, never in our lifetime. So that shows you how much I know, okay? And a happy Mother's Day to all the moms and grandmothers. With a special blessing for all of you at the end of Mass today. But first, I want to talk about the book of Revelation, which we heard read in our second reading, and is not often talked about or preached about or perhaps read because it's a kind of a difficult book to read. If you were assigning it a genre of literature, you would call it apocalyptic literature. Now, when we hear that word apocalyptic, apocalypse, we think about like asteroids falling from the sky, right, and the motes of lava and things like that. It kind of stirs up images that are not very good, images of maybe of the world's destruction or something like that. What the word apocalypse actually means is unveiling. So there's something about reality that we can see and experience in our normal way of interacting with things, but there's other aspects of our lives, of the world, that are hidden and mysterious. And what apocalyptic literature sets out to do is to lift the veil off of some of the mystery of human life and give us a glimpse not of the destruction of the world, but the end in the sense of its telos. The word telos in Greek means its purpose, its meaning. In other words, where is it all going? What ultimately is our destiny as human beings? What is the final purpose and state of the world, right? We all recognize, even people that are not Christians can recognize this, that our world currently is in a state of becoming. It's in a state of tribulation, of difficulty, of some good things, but also some bad things that we would hope to resolve. And so the end of the world is really the goal of human life. What is the life going to be like when all of those tribulations and problems have finally been resolved? And how will that take place? So the book of Revelation really is a theology of history. It uses symbolic language in order to interpret in advance what will take place over the course of the life of the church. So, of course, it's written at the very beginning of the life of the church. It's written by the last apostle to still be alive, St. John the Beloved, St. John the Evangelist. All the others have been martyred. John is on the Isle of Patmos. Now, if you go to Patmos today, you think that's a beautiful place to be at the end of one's life, but he was there in prison. Patmos was a penal colony for the Romans. And so he's there in prison, and it's there he has this vision. And again, and that's what the book of Revelation is. It's these series of letters and then a series of visions that, again, it's not about like a fortune teller predicting what's going to happen. It's the wisdom of one who knows that whatever happens, God is mysteriously at work. He's mysteriously at the center of our lives, and at the center of human history, and indeed of the whole cosmos. And so he's writing to a church that's already experiencing active persecution. And he's telling them to be faithful, to remain faithful to the gospel that they have received, that despite whatever hardships they will experience, or that the church will experience until the last days, all the wars and the violence and our own sinfulness, that God actually is already bringing about this final consummation, this final goal of the world. So that is what the book of Revelation is about. So it's going to use, the reason it's hard to talk about and read is because it's using symbolic language. And so we have to be able to read the symbols. So we hear in the second reading from St. John his vision of a great multitude from all of the nations, what the Jewish people would have called the Goyim, the ethnoi, all of the non-Jews. That it turns out that the salvation of Christ given to us and through his death and resurrection is not just for the Jewish people. John has a vision of the Jewish people of 144,000, which is a symbolic number. It's 12,000 times the 12 tribes of Israel, that they are a part of this final heaven, right? This new heaven that is going to come about. And so the Jewish people are very much represented in heaven. But he said there's also this vast multitude. There's all these nations, all these tribes that aren't Jewish. And for them too, the gospel of salvation is proclaimed. And the death and resurrection of Christ is really salvation and redemption for them as well. And so John says he sees this vision of a great multitude which no one could count. And they're wearing white robes and holding palm branches. Think about the palm branches we all carried on Palm Sunday. We think about the white robe that children and adults wear at their baptism. Right? So those that wear the white robes are those that are washed clean through baptism, who've become sharers in the new creation. Okay, so that is that symbol. And then he goes on to say that the Lamb seated on the throne will shepherd them. Again, this is symbolic language. A good Jewish person, as John certainly was, would have, the idea of a lamb goes immediately back to the Passover event in which the Israelites in Egypt, on the night before they left, sacrificed the Passover lambs, and the blood of the doorpost was the sign that they would be saved from death. That death would pass over them because of the blood of the Lamb. And so Jesus Christ, of course, is the true Paschal Lamb. It is his sacrifice, his offering on the cross, in his death and resurrection, that saves us from sin and death. So the Lamb is Christ, and the Lamb is seated on the throne. The Lamb is glorified because Christ is risen. And because of that, he leads, we are told, he leads the sheep to life-giving waters. As I said to our young parishioners, this fourth Sunday of Easter is often called Good Shepherd Sunday because all of the Gospels in all 3 years of the cycle of readings speak about Jesus in the Gospel of John referring to himself as the Good Shepherd. We have to recognize, before we can hear Jesus as the Good Shepherd, we have to recognize that he is first the Lamb who was sacrificed for us, who is risen from the dead, and who then leads the sheep to life-giving waters. What are those life-giving waters? Of course, baptism and all the sacraments. Here we gather for the Eucharist, in which we receive Christ himself. And so Jesus says that the sheep hear his voice. So this is not automatic. Membership in the kingdom of God, those who gather around the throne of the Lamb, it's not automatic. It's not magic. God respects our freedom. He loves our freedom as much as he desires our salvation. And so he waits. He waits for us to respond. But he keeps speaking his word. He keeps issuing his voice. He says, my sheep hear my voice. And so those who share in the divine life of God forever are those that hear the voice of the shepherd and respond with their lives. We all know there are many voices. There are many voices vying for attention in our minds and in our hearts. Some of them are very good. Most of them are very bad. And most of them distract us, actually, from listening to the authentic voice of the Good Shepherd that can only be heard in the silence of prayer, in meditating on the Word of God, in listening to the teachings of the Church. And so that brings us to Pope Leo XIV, one of our own, an American, is now the successor of St. Peter and the vicar of Christ on earth. You see, Jesus, in appointing the apostles, sent them forth to teach all nations, baptize them, right? To teach, to celebrate the sacraments, to govern the faithful in charity until he came again. But of course, Christ was not, he knew he wasn't going to come back in the lifetime of the apostles. St. John the Apostle wrote the book of Revelation, the last apostle to be alive. But those apostles understood that their mission included the need to appoint successors, those who would continue their mission and ministry, which is ultimately the mission and ministry of Christ, the redemption of the world. And so they appointed successors, and those successors appointed successors, and their successors appointed successors. And so here we are 2,000 years later, and the 4,000 or so bishops around the world are collectively the successors of the apostles. So if you want to know what is the authentic voice of Christ, what is the Good Shepherd teaching us in our own day, in our own times and situations and temptations that we experience, we need to listen to the voice of those that have been appointed shepherds. Even if they say things that may be difficult or irksome or that make us think twice, that we have to recognize that Christ has chosen to speak authentically in the world through those that he sent forth to teach all nations and to baptize, and even today, the successors of those same men. Right? And so one of them is the principle of unity among them all. Just as Peter was chosen as the rock, the foundation upon which Christ would build his church, and Peter was appointed as the prince of the apostles. So even today, his mission and ministry continues in and through the Bishop of Rome, in and through the successor of St. Peter. And so I think we'll have a lot to listen to from Pope Leo. And we, especially as Americans, will have a lot to listen to. There will be a lot, I think, that if we are willing to listen, that he will say, which is nothing, he says nothing more than what the church says. But perhaps in God's providence, he's allowed it that we can hear a little bit more. Because now we'll hear one who speaks in our own language, his own native language and ours, and one who understands the troubles and difficulties of life here and can speak in a real way. We always have to be willing to listen. We have to be willing to listen, to open our hearts to the authentic voice of Christ, the Good Shepherd, and then ask for the grace to respond with our lives, with our words, with our actions, in pursuing whatever God's will for us at every moment. Because slowly, even if it's difficult at first, Christ is leading us by that means to the springs of life-giving water and to the Eucharist that we celebrate today.